The crystal chandelier above shattered not just light, but my entire world. As I watched my husband of 17 years, Hayes, dance intimately with another woman at our anniversary party, the music swelled, a cruel symphony to my undoing. And then, her smug smile, her whispered, "Mine," and my daughter Danielle's scream broke the silence of my shock. The taste of betrayal was bitter, but the sting of my open palm across Tiffany Riker's face was sweeter. In that moment, I knew. My marriage was dead, and so was the naive Glattis I once was. I was done. 17 years. 17 years I had worn the name Glattis Kingston, a name I once believed was synonymous with a promise, a future, a love story worthy of the grandest novels. Hayes, my Hayes, had been my dashing prince, the man for whom I willingly set aside my dreams of curating ancient histories to cultivate his ambitions instead. His rise, I had convinced myself, was our time's rise. I'd traded crumbling artifacts for corporate dinners, dusty archives for gleaming financial reports, all for the shared vision of our perfect life. My quiet passion for art history, once a vibrant flame, had dwindled to a barely flickering ember, lovingly sacrificed on the altar of his booming career. This party, tonight, was meant to be the culmination of that devotion, an opulent celebration of our enduring love, our resilience, our unwavering partnership. I had spent months meticulously planning every detail. The shimmering white lilies that cascaded from every surface, chosen for their delicate scent that always reminded me of our wedding day, the renowned string quartet playing our favorite classical pieces, the bespoke catering that offered Hayes's preferred Wagyu and my beloved truffle risotto, the ballroom, hired for its grand chandeliers and panoramic city views, pulsed with the soft glow of hundreds of fairy lights. A stage set for a dream. I remembered standing by the entrance just hours ago, a tremor of pure joy running through me as Hayes, resplendent in his tailored tuxedo, took my hand and kissed my knuckles. His eyes, I thought, filled with admiration. I had felt beautiful, cherished, utterly secure. The air had been thick with the scent of expensive perfume, celebratory champagne, and the sweet, almost intoxicating aroma of success. My success, our success. Then, the music shifted. An upbeat jazz number that Hayes always claimed to adore. He'd moved away from my side, ostensibly to greet a late-arriving business associate, but my gaze, drawn by an inexplicable pull, found him not among the suits, but on the dance floor, enveloped in a far too intimate embrace, with a woman I barely recognized. Tiffany Riker, a new junior executive in his department, was a decade younger, with a manufactured blonde mane and a dress cut daringly low. My breath hitched. The world seemed to tilt. The music, once a cheerful backdrop, now screeched like discordant violins in my ears. The murmurs of polite conversation dissolved into an unbearable ringing. I watched, frozen, as Hayes laughed, his head thrown back, a genuine unburdened laugh I hadn't heard from him in years, reserved it seemed, for times her asterisk. His hand, the same hand that had slipped my wedding ring onto my finger, rested possessively on her lower back. It wasn't a casual touch. It was the touch of ownership, of a shared secret. And then, she looked up. Her eyes, cat-like and triumphant, met mine across the crowded room. A slow, venomous smile spread across her lips. I could almost read the words from her mouth even through the din. It was a declaration, a conquest. And in that precise, gut-wrenching second, another sound sliced through the suffocating silence of my shock. "You bitch!" Danielle's voice, sharp and raw with adolescent fury, ripped through the polite veneer of the party. My 17-year-old daughter, who had stood by my side, helping me pick out table linens and orchestrate guest lists, was now surging forward, her face a mask of incandescent rage. She was charging Tiffany, a hurricane of betrayed innocence. My feet moved before my mind could command them. The sheer instinct to protect my daughter, to extinguish the smirking triumph on that woman's face, propelled me forward. I heard gasps, hushed exclamations. The string quartet faltered, a discordant squeal cutting off mid-note. My vision tunneled, focused solely on Tiffany Riker. My arms swung, not with thought, but with the accumulated force of 17 years of sacrifice, of misplaced trust, of a love that had just been publicly desecrated. The sharp crack echoed through the sudden silence of the ballroom. The immediate shock of the impact gave way to a cold, searing clarity. Adrenaline surged through my veins, not with panic, but with an almost predatory focus. The Glattis who had believed in fairy tale endings, who poured her soul into Hayes's ambition. That woman died the moment my hand connected with Tiffany's insolent face. It was a death, yes, but also a birth. The naive love I had carried for 17 years evaporated, replaced by something harder, sharper, infinitely more dangerous. This wasn't about tears or pleading. It was about precision, about tearing down the carefully constructed facade of his life, brick by meticulous brick. My world had shattered, but the shards would be my weapons. The walk out of the ballroom was a blur of hushed whispers and averted gazes. I felt Danielle's small, fierce hand slip into mine, her grip a lifeline, a silent promise of solidarity. We didn't look back, didn't spare a glance for Hayes, who I imagined stood amidst the debris of his own making. The cool night air outside the hotel was a shock after the stifling heat of the party, a cleansing breath that sharpened my focus. We rode home in silence, the quiet car a stark contrast to the earlier cacophony. Danielle leaned her head against the window, her shoulders still trembling faintly, but her presence was a fortress beside me. Once inside our now too large house, a profound quiet settled, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. The silence wasn't empty. It was pregnant with unspoken fury and a burgeoning resolve. Danielle turned to me. Her eyes, red-rimmed but clear, holding a maturity far beyond her 17 years. "Mom," she began, her voice hoarse. "He doesn't deserve you. He doesn't deserve any times of this." She gestured vaguely around the expensive living room, the space that had been built on my dreams and sacrifices. Her simple words were a balm, a mirror reflecting the steel I felt forming inside me. It wasn't just rage. Not anymore. Rage was fleeting, a burst of heat. This was a cold, precise calculation. This was justice, meticulously planned and executed. Hayes had played a game of betrayal. I would play a game of consequence. He certainly doesn't, I agreed, my voice surprisingly steady. And he won't have any of it for much longer. My first move was to the study, a room Hayes had always called Times his asterisk. I sat at Times his Times mahogany desk, pulling out Times my Times phone. Kristen Austin, the city's top real estate agent, answered on the second ring. "Kristen," I said, my voice betraying none of the turmoil that had just erupted, "I need you to list the house. Immediately. At full market value, no negotiations. I want it gone, yesterday." She, a friend for years, simply said, "Glattis, are you all right? What happened? I'll explain later. Just do it." This house, a sprawling testament to Hayes's perceived success, was a cornerstone of my Times inheritance, lovingly left to me by my parents. They had worked their fingers to the bone, not for Hayes, but for me, Times to have security, a quick, searing memory of my mother's warm hands, my father's proud smile as they signed the deed over to me before they passed, reinforced the sacred trust I held. Hayes had simply inhabited it, like a parasite on my family's legacy. Now, it would fund my future, not his. Next, I accessed our joint bank accounts, those carefully managed repositories of our shared life. With a few swift clicks and transfers, every cent that wasn't legally tied to Hayes's personal funds was moved into an account I had opened years ago, purely for my individual expenditures. Then, with an almost primal satisfaction, I hit the freeze button on all joint credit cards and accounts. The digital ping of confirmation was a small, quiet victory. He wouldn't just be homeless, he'd be penniless. Finally, I made the call I knew would signify my unwavering intent. Mrs. Melinda Jasper. Her name alone struck fear into the hearts of cheating spouses across the state. She wasn't just a divorce attorney. She was a legend. A woman whose legal prowess was matched only by her icy resolve. Her track record was pristine, her fees astronomical, and her reputation as a shark, well-earned. Mrs. Jasper, I stated, my voice echoing the authority I now felt. My name is Glattis Kingston. I need your services. I want a divorce, and I want everything he tried to take from me, and then some. The silence on the other end stretched, then a low, measured voice replied, Mrs. Kingston, I've heard about your evening. It seems you've had quite the wake-up call. Tell me everything. I settled back, the shards of my shattered dream now meticulously arranged, forming the sharp edge of my new beginning. The air in the house grew heavy, thick with the unspoken anticipation of Hayes's return. I sat in the living room, the muted glow of a single lamp casting long shadows, a stark contrast to the dazzling brilliance of the ballroom only hours before. Danielle had retreated to her room, leaving me alone with my thoughts, sharpening the resolve that now ran cold and clear through my veins. I didn't have to wait long. The crunch of tires on the gravel drive, followed by the familiar thud of his car door, announced his arrival. He was home, oblivious, I imagined, to the seismic shift that had occurred in his perfectly ordered universe. He likely noticed the "for sale" sign first. My new real estate agent, Kristen, had been shockingly efficient. A large, stark board planted squarely on the manicured lawn. I heard the front door open. Then a pause. A beat of bewildered silence, followed by a heavy sigh. Perhaps he thought it was a prank, or some misguided protest. But the moment he stepped inside, the carefully constructed illusion of his life would begin to unravel. Hayes walked into the living room, his tuxedo jacket slung carelessly over one arm, his tie loosened. He looked tired, perhaps a little disheveled from whatever attempts he'd made to salvage his evening, or his dignity, after our dramatic exit. His eyes, clouded with a mixture of confusion and self-pity, found me immediately. He had expected tears, hysterics, perhaps even an argument he could twist to his advantage. Instead, he found me sitting calmly, a manila envelope resting on the coffee table before me. Glattis? What in God's name is that sign doing on our lawn? He demanded, his voice strained, a tremor of irritation just beneath the surface. He tried for indignation, but it sounded hollow. He hadn't yet grasped the true scale of what he faced. I picked up the envelope, sliding the neatly bound stack of papers across the table toward him. Those are the divorce papers, Hayes. Signed, sealed, and delivered. Consider it an anniversary gift from me to you. His jaw slackened. He glanced from the papers to my face, then back again, as if the words on the page would rearrange themselves into something less damning. Divorce? Glattis? Don't be absurd. This is a misunderstanding. A lapse in judgment. Tiffany means nothing. You know that. He made a move to sit beside me, but I didn't flinch, didn't offer an inch of welcoming space. A lapse in judgment that lasted 8 months, according to your assistant Jessica, and included secret bank accounts. As Mrs. Jasper has already discovered, you've been planning your exit for a while, Hayes. I'm just making it a little more efficient for you. My voice was devoid of emotion, a monotone that cut through his bluster like a surgeon's scalpel. His eyes widened, a flicker of genuine fear replacing the performative anger. Secret accounts? What are you talking about? And what about our money? Our joint accounts? He reached for his phone, likely to check. Frozen, I supplied, watching his face drain of color. Every single joint account, every credit card, everything you didn't have the foresight to keep purely in your name. All the funds that were legally mine have been transferred. You are, for all intents and purposes, financially isolated. This house, the one you're standing in, which happens to be my inheritance, is already in escrow. Panic began to rise in his eyes, stark and ugly. He ran a hand through his hair, his earlier attempts at righteous indignation crumbling. You can't do this, Glattis. This is insane. Where am I supposed to live? How am I supposed to pay for anything? You're destroying me. You destroyed yourself, Hayes, I corrected, my gaze unwavering. Your choices led you here. Not mine. I am simply cleaning up the mess you made of my life, and I assure you, the mess I leave for you will be far tidier than the one you left for me at our anniversary party. I stood, signaling the end of the conversation. There was no room for negotiation, no space for his pleas, no fuel for his anger. He stood alone in the center of the living room, a king in a rapidly crumbling castle, while I, the architect of its downfall, simply turned and walked away. The quiet click of my bedroom door closing was the final, definitive sound, leaving him to confront the silent, stark reality of his immediate ruin. The quiet click of my bedroom door closing was the final, definitive sound, leaving him to confront the silent, stark reality of his immediate ruin. The following morning, the news of Tiffany Riker's abrupt departure from Hayes's firm reached me, not from Mrs. Jasper, but through a hushed call from Kristen, my real estate agent. Tiffany, it seemed, had been summarily dismissed, her public display of indiscretion costing her more than just a reputation. Karma, I mused, worked with a satisfying swiftness when properly catalyzed. It was a minor victory, a skirmish won, but it was merely a prelude to the larger battle. The true arsenal arrived via an unexpected email, its subject line stark: information regarding Hayes. It was from Jessica, Hayes's assistant, a woman I had always treated with respect, often bringing her coffee or a thoughtful gift. Her message was brief, apologetic, and devastatingly precise. Mrs. Kingston, I am so sorry. Hayes has been seeing Tiffany for 8 months. I have documented his travel, expenses, and a pattern of unusual transfers to an offshore account he thought was secure. I couldn't stand by and watch this anymore. My loyalty was always to the firm, and to you, as a decent human being. I've attached everything. My hands trembled as I opened the file. Dates, names of hotels, falsified expense reports for business trips that were clearly trysts, and damning screenshots of a secondary financial portfolio, meticulously hidden. $2 million. He hadn't just been unfaithful. He had been meticulously planning an escape, building a life separate from mine, ready to abandon me financially. The initial shock of discovery was replaced by a cold, righteous fury. Jessica's words, her quiet act of defiance, validated every raw emotion I had felt, transforming them into fuel for my campaign. It wasn't just my house he had lived in, but my life he had systematically dismantled. With Mrs. Jasper now armed with this undeniable evidence, I shifted my focus to the physical act of moving forward. The sprawling house, once a symbol of our shared life, now felt like a mausoleum. Danielle and I needed a clean slate. We found a charming, sun-drenched apartment in a bustling, eclectic neighborhood downtown. It was smaller, certainly, a stark contrast to the grand, formal rooms we had left behind, but it hummed with a different kind of energy. It felt light, unbound. Moving into it was cathartic. We painted the walls in soft, hopeful shades of cream and sage. We bought new furniture, pieces that reflected our time's tastes, not Hayes's preference for heavy, dark wood. Danielle, though still bruised by the betrayal, found a sense of agency in choosing her own room's decor, transforming it into a vibrant sanctuary. One afternoon, we laughed as we wrestled with a stubborn flat-pack bookshelf, covered in sawdust and paint, our bond strengthening with every shared effort. This new space wasn't just 4 walls. It was a testament to our resilience, a promise of new beginnings, a haven built on our terms. The final, essential step in severing the past was digital. My phone, once a conduit for his intermittent messages and the occasional demanding call, became a weapon of self-preservation. I blocked Hayes. Not just his number but his email, his social media profiles, every conceivable avenue of contact. I did the same for Tiffany Riker. The act was remarkably simple. a few taps on a screen. But the feeling that accompanied it was profound. A deep, cleansing exhale. It wasn't about rage or hatred anymore. It was about protecting my peace, my sanity, my future. The insidious tendrils of their presence, which had poisoned my life for so long, were finally, irrevocably cut. The silence that followed was not empty, but full of space, full of potential, full of the quiet hum of a life being reclaimed. The digital piece I had so carefully constructed was briefly interrupted by a call from Mrs. Jasper, not with new legal maneuvers, but with a report on Hayes's desperate post-exile movements. It seemed, predictably, that once the doors of his lavish life slammed shut, Hayes had sought solace, or perhaps just shelter, with his younger brother, Zachary. Zachary Kingston was, in many ways, the antithesis of Hayes, quietly principled, grounded, and possessed of an unwavering sense of integrity, traits I had always admired, even during my marriage. He and Hayes had always been cordial, but never close, their differing values creating a subtle chasm between them. Mrs. Jasper's account, relayed with her usual crisp efficiency, painted a vivid picture. Hayes, seemingly oblivious to the consequences of bringing his mistress into a family home, had arrived at Zachary's modest, tastefully appointed house with Tiffany Riker in tow. He'd clearly expected an open door, a sympathetic ear, and perhaps a shared laugh over his crazy ex-wife. But Zachary, I knew, valued loyalty and family above all else, and his definition of family extended beyond just blood. He tried to spin it, Mrs. Kingston, Mrs. Jasper reported. Told Zachary you were being irrational, vindictive, blamed you for the scandal, of course. I could almost hear Hayes's whining tone, his attempts to play the victim, a role he perfected when cornered. But Zachary, she explained, was not so easily swayed. He'd observed Hayes's behavior, not just at the party, but over the years. He knew the kind of man his brother truly was. Zachary informed Hayes that while he was family, Tiffany Riker was not. He made it clear she was not welcome to stay under his roof. Mrs. Jasper continued, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. I imagined the scene. Hayes, sputtering with indignation, Tiffany, her smugness likely evaporating, standing awkwardly in Zachary's entrance hall. He told Hayes that what he had done to you and Danielle was unforgivable, a betrayal of everything their family stood for. He emphasized that his home would always be open to Danielle, and to you, should you ever need it, but not to the source of his brother's dishonor. A quiet sense of vindication settled over me. Zachary's unwavering moral compass was a rare thing, and it pointed squarely away from Hayes. His refusal to sanction Hayes's infidelity, to even provide refuge for his mistress, spoke volumes. It wasn't just a rejection of Tiffany. It was a profound judgment on Hayes's character, delivered by his own flesh and blood. Hayes, accustomed to adoration and unquestioning loyalty, would have been stunned, humiliated. Zachary had not raised his voice, Mrs. Jasper noted, but his words had been sharper than any shout. I cannot condone this, Hayes, and I will not enable it. What you have done to Glattis and Danielle is disgusting. You made your bed. You will lie in it, alone. That phrase, alone, resonated with me. It was the essence of the justice I was pursuing. Hayes had built his life on a foundation of deceit, expecting others to bear the consequences of his actions. Now, he was being forced to confront the solitude of his own making. Zachary's disillusionment was complete, a definitive crack in the family facade Hayes had so carefully maintained. My former brother-in-law, a man I now realized held more integrity than my husband ever had made his choice. And his choice affirmed mine. A quiet reassurance that even in the wreckage of betrayal, there were still honest hearts. The rift between the brothers, Mrs. Jasper concluded, was now a chasm, unbridgeable by Hayes's empty apologies or desperate pleas. It was just another brick falling from Hayes's crumbling castle, and I felt not glee, but a profound, almost peaceful, sense of inevitability. The quiet certainty of Hayes's isolation, a profound stillness granted by Zachary's judgment, was quickly followed by the satisfying hum of wheels in motion. Not literal wheels, but the intricate gears of justice, carefully engineered to dismantle what remained of his life. Kristen Austen's voice, bright and brimming with triumph, echoed through the phone line just a few days later. "Glattis, you won't believe it. The house is sold. Full asking price, cash offer, no contingencies. And guess who the buyer is?" She paused, clearly savoring the dramatic reveal. "Sawyer Industries. You know Mr. Sawyer? He was at your party. Apparently heard the whole thing unfold." A slow, knowing smile touched my lips. Sawyer Industries, a long-standing competitor of Hayes's firm, known for their aggressive strategic acquisitions. Mr. Sawyer, a man with a reputation for both sharp business acumen and a quiet disdain for anything less than forthright conduct. He had witnessed Hayes's public disgrace, and now he was capitalizing on it, not just for prime real estate, but for the inherent satisfaction of a well-placed, entirely legal jab. "He wanted to close quickly, Glattis," Kristen continued. "Said he admired your decisiveness. And he also mentioned he had a particular appreciation for clean deals. I think he enjoyed sticking it to Hayes, if I'm being honest." I felt a surge of quiet, almost zen-like satisfaction. It wasn't glee, but a profound affirmation. The house, my inheritance, had been a symbol of my sacrifice, then a cage. And now, it was a finely sharpened arrow aimed directly at Hayes's rapidly shrinking world. It would fund my new life, yes, but it would also serve as a constant, tangible reminder to Hayes of what his betrayal had cost him. He would drive past it, see the Sawyer Industries logo, and know, with every fiber of his being, that his public humiliation had paved the way for his rival's victory. The poetic justice was almost too perfect. The real game-changer, however, came from Mrs. Melinda Jasper. Her voice, usually calm and measured, held a note of restrained excitement when she called. "Mrs. Kingston," she began, her tone crisp as fresh linen. Jessica's information was not only accurate but incredibly detailed. "My team has successfully traced and frozen 2 separate offshore accounts, containing exactly $2 million. These accounts were established over a year ago, with funds systematically transferred out of your joint assets. This isn't a lapse in judgment, Glattis. This is premeditation. This is attempted financial fraud. This is proof Hayes was planning to leave, and leave you with nothing, for a very long time." The air left my lungs in a slow, controlled release. $2 million. Not just a substantial sum, but irrefutable proof of his long-term deception. It confirmed the cold, calculating nature of his betrayal. He hadn't just stumbled into an affair. He had plotted an escape, meticulously constructing a financial fortress while I blindly built our shared future. The rage I felt wasn't a hot, consuming fire, but a cold, hard diamond forming in my chest. This wasn't just about emotional wounds, it was about his criminal intent, his willingness to strip me bare, financially and emotionally. "Excellent, Mrs. Jasper," I replied, my voice remarkably steady. "What does this mean for the divorce proceedings?" "It means, Mrs. Kingston, that Hayes Kingston has just handed us the keys to his financial kingdom," she said, and I could almost hear the triumphant glint in her eyes. "With this evidence, along with the proof of his 8-month affair, his public disgrace, and your documented sacrifices to his career, we can push for a far more aggressive settlement. We will seek full spousal support, a substantial portion of his remaining assets, and ensure Danielle's trust fund is more than adequately provided for. His attempts to hide assets, to commit what amounts to financial malfeasance, will be laid bare. There will be no sympathy for him in court. This ensures not just your financial independence, but his absolute and undeniable consequence." I closed my eyes, picturing Hayes, once so confident, so smug, now cornered, stripped of his lies, exposed. My own transformation felt complete. I was no longer the woman who had nurtured a dream, only to see it shattered. I was the architect of his ruin, yes, but more importantly, the architect of my own new foundation. Every painstaking detail, every strategic move, was a deliberate stroke in rebuilding my life, stone by meticulous stone. The financial retaliation wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming power, reclaiming dignity, and finally, unequivocally, reclaiming myself. The game had truly begun, and I had all the winning cards. Even as I meticulously arranged my winning hand, Hayes, in his characteristic blindness, still believed he could bluff his way out of the corner he'd painted himself into. He underestimated not just my resolve, but the world's appetite for a public spectacle, especially one featuring a man so thoroughly exposed. Within days of the house sale and the frozen accounts, Hayes did what he always did when cornered. He sought to control the narrative. He booked an interview on a local news channel, a desperate, ill-advised attempt to clear his name. I watched it unfold from the quiet comfort of my new apartment. Danielle beside me, a bowl of popcorn untouched between us. Hayes sat across from the interviewer, looking appropriately contrite in a dark suit. His eyes carefully calibrated to convey wounded innocence. He spoke in hushed, earnest tones, painting himself as the victim of a vindictive ex-wife, a woman unhinged by jealousy, driven by a thirst for his wealth. Glattis has always been prone to dramatics, he began, sighing mournfully. This situation with Tiffany was a brief, regrettable indiscretion, a moment of weakness, nothing more. I was trying to save our marriage, to protect my family, but her reaction has been extreme. Destructive. She's taken everything. He even managed to squeeze out a few artful tears, dabbing at his eyes with a pristine white handkerchief, implying I was tearing his life apart for no justifiable reason. He portrayed Tiffany as a naive junior colleague, manipulated by his charm, rather than a willing participant in a prolonged affair. His performance was a masterclass in self-pity, designed to elicit public sympathy, to turn the tide of opinion back in his favor. For a moment, a flicker of doubt, a faint tremor of my old, naive self, tried to surface. Had I gone too far? Was I indeed vindictive? Then, the cold clarity returned, sharp as a winter morning. He truly believed he was the victim. He truly believed his lies. And that, more than anything, fueled the quiet inferno within me. But Hayes had forgotten one crucial detail. Mrs. Melinda Jasper. She was not merely a legal shark. She was a strategist, anticipating every move, every countermove. Her team had been poised, waiting for this exact moment. As Hayes's interview aired, as his carefully constructed facade began to flicker across screens, Mrs. Jasper's office initiated the swift and devastating counterattack. A meticulously curated video compilation, authenticated and time-stamped, began to flood the internet. It wasn't just one clip. It was a mosaic of betrayal. Hayes and Tiffany, hand in hand, laughing intimately at a beachfront resort. Hayes, embracing Tiffany passionately outside a restaurant in a city he'd claimed to be visiting for a solo business trip. Hayes, discreetly entering Tiffany's apartment building late at night. The videos spanned months, each frame a hammer blow to his brief indiscretion narrative. There was no denying the intimacy, the familiarity, the calculated deception that contradicted every tearful word he uttered on television. The internet, a beast both merciless and swift, erupted. Social media platforms became a roaring firestorm of indignation. The hashtags number Hayes the Hypocrite and number Kingston Karma trended globally. Memes of Hayes's tearful face plastered over screenshots of him canoodling with Tiffany spread like wildfire. Traditional news outlets, initially hesitant, quickly pivoted, retracting their sympathetic reports and joining the chorus of condemnation. His carefully cultivated image as a respected businessman and devoted family man crumbled into a pile of ashes. Exposed for the sham it had always been, he was no longer just a cheating husband. He was a public pariah, a national punchline, a cautionary tale for anyone contemplating similar deceit. I watched it all, not with a triumphant roar, but with a quiet, almost serene detachment. Danielle, her earlier anger replaced by a grim satisfaction, squeezed my hand. "He deserved it, Mom," she whispered, her voice firm. I simply nodded. The satisfaction wasn't sweet. Not in a malicious way. It was the profound peace of watching the scales of justice finally balance, heavy with the undeniable truth. His public humiliation was not my doing, not directly. It was a consequence he had meticulously engineered himself. Brick by brick, lie by calculated lie. I had merely provided the world with the proof. The game was indeed in play, and Hayes had just shown his hand, a weak, deceptive hand, to a global audience. The world, it seemed, was now on my side. The global chorus of condemnation had barely begun to fade, when a far more seismic tremor shook Hayes Kingston's already crumbling world. It came from the one man whose approval he had always craved, whose respect he had squandered with such careless abandon. His father, Kingston Nicholas. Kingston Nicholas was not a man swayed by public opinion or fleeting scandal, but by an unwavering, almost archaic code of honor and integrity. He was the patriarch, a titan of industry whose name commanded respect, built on generations of hard work and unblemished reputation. To him, betrayal of family, particularly in such a public and vulgar manner, was an affront to everything he stood for. I knew him to be a stern man, a man of few words, but when he spoke, the world listened. And now, he was about to speak about his eldest son. The news broke not through an anonymous leak, but a formal press release from the Kingston Group, his multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. It was terse, unsparing, and utterly definitive. In it, Kingston Nicholas announced, with profound regret, the immediate and permanent severance of all ties with Hayes Kingston. He was removed from the board of directors of every family business, divested of all investments, and stripped of any claim to the family legacy. The statement cited a complete and irreconcilable breach of trust and conduct unbecoming of a Kingston, a public disownment that reverberated far beyond the financial district. For Hayes, who had always clung to the prestige of his family name, this was not just a financial death sentence. It was a complete annihilation of his identity. He was no longer a Kingston, not in the eyes of his father, and therefore, not in the eyes of the world that mattered to him. Mrs. Jasper delivered the final exquisite detail with a quiet flourish a few days later. "Mrs. Kingston," she informed me, her voice echoing the gravity of the announcement, "Kingston Nicholas has not only disowned Hayes but has also taken definitive steps regarding his inheritance. All shares, properties, and financial assets previously earmarked for Hayes Kingston have been formally and irrevocably transferred into a newly established ironclad trust for Danielle. He wishes to ensure her future security, entirely separate from her father's influence. And as a testament to his own principles, I felt a wave of profound relief wash over me, deeper and more potent than any satisfaction from Hayes's public shaming. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice for my daughter. Kingston Nicholas, a man I had once regarded with respectful distance, had demonstrated a fierce, unwavering loyalty to the moral compass of his family, and to Danielle, a loyalty that transcended the biological ties to his errant son. The image of Danielle, her face alight with innocent joy, picking out table linens for our anniversary party, flashed through my mind. Her future, once uncertain and threatened by Hayes's deceit, was now secure, protected by the very hand that had once sustained him. He also made it clear, Mrs. Jasper added, her voice softening almost imperceptibly, that he deeply regrets the pain Hayes has caused you and Danielle. He understands your actions and supports your pursuit of justice. A quiet "Thank you, Mr. Nicholas," escaped my lips, a silent acknowledgement to the stern, honorable man who had, in his own way, become an unexpected ally. Hayes was now truly alone, adrift on a sea of his own making, stripped of his name, his fortune, and his last bastion of family support. The final brick of his crumbling castle had fallen, not with a crash, but with the chilling finality of a public pronouncement, sealing his fate in the cold, hard stone of consequence. The path ahead for Danielle and me, once shadowed by his betrayal, now stretched wide and clear, paved with the unexpected kindness of a principled man and the undeniable weight of karma. The quiet peace of our new life felt earned, a delicate tapestry woven from resilience and newfound freedom. Danielle and I had settled into a comfortable rhythm, exploring the vibrant culinary scene of our downtown neighborhood. One particular evening, we found ourselves at the Gilded Fork, a chic bistro renowned for its understated elegance and impeccable service. The soft clinking of silverware, the murmur of contented conversation, and the aroma of roasted herbs filled the air. We were halfway through our crème brûlée, laughing about a particularly bad rom-com we'd watched the night before, when the harmony of the evening was abruptly shattered. A sudden, almost imperceptible hush fell over our section of the restaurant. I felt it before I saw it. A shift in the ambient energy, a tightening in the periphery of my vision. Then, two figures emerged from the entrance, their eyes scanning the room with an air of desperate purpose. Hayes and Tiffany. Hayes looked diminished. His tailored suit seemed to hang on him, his shoulders stooped, his face etched with a gaunt desperation I had never seen before. Tiffany, beside him, still carried a veneer of defiance, but it was thinner, almost brittle. Her signature smug smile was nowhere to be found, replaced by a nervous flutter of her eyes. They moved directly towards our table, their approach cutting a palpable path through the once relaxed atmosphere. My initial instinct was a weary sigh, a desire to simply disappear. But then, a cold resolve settled in. I had come too far, rebuilt too much, to be provoked by their predictable desperation. I met Hayes's gaze with a calm, unwavering stare, my expression utterly devoid of emotion. Danielle, sensing my composure, tightened her grip on my hand beneath the table, her own face a carefully neutral mask, though I could feel the tension radiating from her. "Glattis," Hayes began, his voice hoarse, a pathetic plea lacing his tone. He stopped a few feet from our table, Tiffany hovering awkwardly behind him. "Glattis, please, we need to talk." He glanced around, as if expecting the entire restaurant to rally to his cause. "There's nothing left to discuss, Hayes," I replied, my voice low and even, not a tremor of anger. I picked up my dessert spoon, a deliberate, dismissive gesture. "Our legal matters are being handled. Your personal matters are entirely your concern." Tiffany, her patience apparently wearing thin, stepped forward. "Don't pretend you haven't enjoyed this, Glattis." Tearing him down. "You're a vindictive bitch." A flicker of annoyance, quickly suppressed. I simply raised an eyebrow. "Vindictive? Or simply ensuring accountability for your choices, Tiffany?" My gaze drifted briefly to Hayes, who visibly flinched. Hayes's eyes darted between us, his desperation escalating. "This isn't fair, Glattis. You've taken everything. My father, my job, my home. What more do you want?" It was then that Danielle made her move. Without a word, she pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen with practiced speed. She held it up, angled precisely so Tiffany could see the vibrant, colorful squares on the display. "Funny you should mention everything, Tiffany," Danielle said, her voice clear and cutting, carrying just loud enough to draw the attention of the surrounding diners. "Because it seems you're not as invested in everything as you made out to be." Tiffany's eyes widened, locking onto the screen. It was her own Instagram feed, and prominently displayed were several recent posts. A photo of her sipping cocktails on a beach, captioned, "Single and ready to mingle. Number new beginnings, number freedom." Another, a selfie with a group of friends, read, "Besties night out? Who needs a man when you have these ladies?" Each post was dated within the last few days, a glaring contradiction to her presence here, by Hayes's side. A wave of mortification washed over Tiffany's face, stripping away her last vestige of defiance. The color drained from her cheeks, replaced by a ghastly pallor. Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. She had been publicly, utterly exposed, not by me, but by her own superficial vanity. The whispers around us grew louder, punctuated by the unmistakable click of phones being pulled out. With a choked gasp, Tiffany dropped the act entirely. She shot a look of pure loathing at Hayes, as if he were to blame for her own colossal stupidity, then spun on her heel and fled. She practically ran out of the restaurant, her high heels clacking a frantic rhythm on the polished floor, leaving Hayes standing alone, abandoned and utterly humiliated. Hayes stood there, frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief, then with a raw, agonizing despair. The last illusion, the last shred of his carefully constructed victimhood, had evaporated with Tiffany's flight. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, begging, but there was nothing left to give. I placed my spoon down with a soft click. My voice, when I spoke, was calm, almost gentle, yet it carried the weight of every wrong he had committed. You made your choices, Hayes, every single one of them. Now, you get to live with them. I rose slowly, deliberately. Danielle standing beside me. We didn't linger. We didn't glance back at the wreckage of the man who had once been my husband. We simply turned, our backs straight, our heads held high, and walked out of the Gilded Fork. Leaving Hayes Kingston alone in the center of the elegant restaurant, a shattered man amidst the sympathetic, judging stares of strangers, the silence we left behind was heavy, pregnant with his final, undeniable defeat. The quiet dignity of leaving Hayes a shattered man in the Gilded Fork solidified the peace Danielle and I had begun to forge. For me, that night marked the definitive close of a painful chapter. For Hayes it was merely the beginning of his true descent. He certainly tried to cling to the narrative that he was still a presence in my life, a wound I hadn't quite cauterized. My phone, however, remained a fortress. His calls, an endless barrage of unidentified numbers, were sent straight to voicemail, then deleted without a listen. His emails, initially pleading, then enraged, then desperate, landed in a dedicated spam folder, a digital graveyard I never visited. Even when intermediaries, old acquaintances swayed by his desperate pleas, reached out, I offered a polite but firm refusal. "There's nothing left to say," was my standard, unwavering reply. He made his choices. My peace, hard-won and meticulously guarded, was not negotiable. Mrs. Jasper, ever the meticulous chronicler of Hayes's unraveling, kept me indirectly informed. Each report from her office, relayed with the detached professionalism of a surgeon describing an inevitable procedure, further cemented the stark reality of his self-inflicted ruin. The final judgment of the courts, fueled by the offshore accounts and Jessica's damning evidence, left him with virtually nothing. His last few personal assets, once symbols of his inflated ego, were liquidated to cover legal fees and initial alimony payments that he still vehemently disputed. The expensive watches, the designer suits, the classic car he'd lovingly restored, all were gone, absorbed into the void of his consequences. The contrast between his former life and his new reality was stark, a chasm he had dug himself. He, who had once flown private, stayed in five-star hotels, and dined on Wagyu and vintage Bordeaux, was now unmoored. I heard whispers, confirmed later by Mrs. Jasper's discreet investigations, that he had, for a time, sought refuge in the guest rooms of various transient acquaintances, his welcome rapidly wearing thin. These temporary shelters eventually dried up, leaving him with nowhere to go. The image that haunted me, not with pity, but with a chilling affirmation of justice, was of him sleeping in his car. Not just any car, but the sleek, expensive sedan he had insisted on keeping, perhaps as a last vestige of his former status. It was a cruel irony. A luxury vehicle, now his only home, parked in the shadows of public lots, a silent monument to his hubris. The sight, reported by a distant acquaintance who had spotted him, wasn't one of triumph for me, but of a cold, undeniable reckoning. He had valued superficial wealth and fleeting pleasures over genuine connection, and now even the symbols of that wealth had become a cage of his own making. His next descent was perhaps the most ignominious. The man who scoffed at anything less than gourmet now found himself in lines outside soup kitchens. The same hands that had once confidently signed million-dollar deals, meticulously manicured and adorned with expensive rings, now awkwardly clasped a styrofoam cup of lukewarm coffee, waiting for a meal provided by charity. I imagined him there. A ghost of his former self. Eyes darting. Trying to avoid recognition. His tailored but now rumpled clothes. A pathetic disguise amidst the truly destitute. It was not a sight I wished to witness directly, nor one I needed to. The reports, sparse but consistent, painted a vivid enough picture. He was no longer the flamboyant Hayes Kingston, the successful entrepreneur, the charming prince. He was just Hayes. A man stripped bare, facing the hunger not just of his stomach, but of a soul starved of integrity, a direct consequence of the choices he had so carelessly made. His kingdom was gone, his castle razed, and he, its deposed ruler, was left to wander, picking up the crumbs of a life he had so cavalierly destroyed. While Hayes faced the hollow ache of self-imposed solitude, Danielle and I filled our days not with grand gestures or dramatic pronouncements, but with the quiet, nourishing rhythm of building a life anew. Our downtown apartment, with its wide windows overlooking a vibrant city park, had quickly transformed from a mere dwelling into a sanctuary. It was smaller than the grand house Hayes had once dominated, but every square foot pulsed with our time's energy, our time's choices, our time's freedom. We painted the living room a shade of warm ivory that seemed to capture the morning light, making the space feel expansive and hopeful. Danielle's room, once a battleground of adolescent angst, became a reflection of her blossoming self. Adorned with art prints she loved and shelves filled with books that sparked her intellectual curiosity, we cooked together, laughed over silly TV shows, and spent countless evenings simply talking, rebuilding a mother-daughter bond that had been tested and now forged in steel. This new home wasn't just walls and furniture. It was a testament to our resilience, a quiet symphony of peace after the discordant chaos. Yet, this newfound serenity was not born of idleness. The financial independence I had so fiercely fought for required diligent stewardship. The initial surge of adrenaline from the divorce proceedings had given way to a focused, almost meditative dedication to understanding the intricacies of the financial world. I found myself drawn to it, not out of necessity, but out of a burgeoning fascination. My historical research skills, once applied to ancient civilizations, now found a new application in analyzing market trends, company reports, and real estate projections. I devoured books on investment strategies, subscribed to financial journals, and sought advice from the most respected minds in the field. My first significant move was to invest a substantial portion of the divorce settlement into carefully selected real estate. I bypassed the flashy, high-risk ventures Hayes would have favored, opting instead for solid, undervalued properties with strong growth potential. I spent hours researching neighborhoods, calculating renovation costs, and predicting rental yields. It was a meticulous, almost artistic process, uncovering hidden value where others saw only neglect. Simultaneously, I delved into the stock market, learning to identify stable, dividend-yielding companies, and making strategic plays that gradually, steadily, expanded my portfolio. It was exhilarating, a chess game played with real-world impact, and I found an unexpected joy in mastering its rules. Over the next few years, I transformed from a betrayed wife into something entirely new. A shrewd investor, a quiet powerhouse, a financial genius. As some in my new circles began to whisper, my ventures diversified. From boutique commercial properties to innovative tech startups, each decision a carefully weighed step towards securing an unshakable future for Danielle and myself. The fear of financial insecurity, a ghost that had haunted me during Hayes's manipulations, was utterly banished, replaced by the profound satisfaction of self-sufficiency. But my transformation wasn't solely about financial conquests. The journey through betrayal and rebirth had been intensely personal, yet I realized its universal resonance. I started a blog, initially a private outlet for my reflections, a space to process the raw emotions of my experience. I wrote about the pain of discovery, the meticulous planning of my legal battle, the support of Danielle, and the quiet joy of rebuilding. I didn't mince words about Hayes's actions, but the focus was always on my own journey of empowerment. To my astonishment, the blog resonated deeply. Messages poured in from women around the world, sharing their own stories of betrayal, finding strength and validation in my words. What began as a cathartic exercise quickly evolved into a powerful community. Publishers took notice, and within a year, my blog posts became the foundation of The Phoenix's Gambit: Reclaiming Your Life After Betrayal, a book that soared onto bestseller lists. Signing copies at bookstores, speaking to rooms full of eager faces, I realized my personal crucible had forged not just my own freedom, but a beacon of hope for countless others. It was a profound, humbling realization, and a testament to the fact that even from the deepest ashes, a new, vibrant life could not only rise but shine. Even as my book climbed the charts and my investments thrived, Hayes, ever the maestro of self-deception, still clung to the absurd notion that he could evade the final reckoning. His pathetic attempts to claw back some semblance of his former life had morphed from desperate pleas into outright legal maneuvering, culminating in a ludicrous attempt to declare bankruptcy. Mrs. Jasper's report arrived with her usual dry wit, recounting how his latest desperate gambit was swiftly and emphatically dismissed. He sought to shed his alimony obligations and child support, believing a declaration of financial destitution would wipe his slate clean. But the courts, already armed with the undeniable evidence of his premeditated financial deception and hidden offshore accounts, saw through his pretense. The irony was not lost on me. He had planned to leave me with nothing, and now, his own elaborate schemes ensured he would remain perpetually bound by financial responsibility to the very people he had tried to discard. It was a quiet, profound victory, a tangible assurance that justice, however slow, would not be denied. 5 years peeled away like layers of old skin, each year bringing new growth, new clarity, and an ever-deepening peace. Danielle flourished, graduating with honors and embarking on her own exciting career path. Her trust fund a secure foundation, not a crutch. My investments continued to multiply. My blog evolved into a global platform, and my book saw multiple reprints. Life was full, rich, and entirely on my terms. Hayes, on the other hand, remained a distant, almost mythological figure, a cautionary tale whispered in the periphery. It was during a charity gala, an event I now frequently attended as a patron, that I first heard the casual, almost humorous update on Hayes's continued plight. An old acquaintance, one who had initially pitied Hayes but had since gained perspective, approached me with a sympathetic, almost conspiratorial smile. "Glattis," she began, her voice lowered, "you won't believe it. Hayes, he remarried, twice, and divorced, twice." She shook her head, a mixture of disbelief and weary amusement on her face. The first was some much younger thing, barely out of college, lasted less than a year. The second? A socialite he thought would restore his status. Apparently, she cleaned him out. Now he's rumored to be living with his mother again. A soft, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. No shock, no anger, just a quiet affirmation. It was, in its own pathetic way, exactly what I had expected. Hayes was a man incapable of true introspection, forever trapped in a cycle of self-interest and superficiality. His search for happiness would always be fleeting, built on false pretenses and external validation, destined to crumble under the weight of his unchanging character. He could marry 100 times, chase 1,000 new beginnings, but without genuine commitment, without integrity, he would always arrive at the same desolate end. And throughout these passing years, despite his pathetic, desperate attempts to claw back some semblance of his former life, My phone remained an impenetrable fortress. His sporadic emails, sent from new, unfamiliar addresses, were filtered directly into the void. Calls from numbers I didn't recognize were silenced, never reaching my ear. Even the occasional, well-meaning but misguided message from a mutual acquaintance, relaying some new plea or excuse from Hayes, was met with a polite but firm wall. My life is my own now, I would simply say. And that includes who I allow into it. My peace was not negotiable, and the door to my past, to Hayes Kingston and all the pain he represented, remained shut, locked, and permanently sealed. The silence Hayes left behind was not an emptiness, but a canvas upon which Danielle and I painted a life vibrant with our own colors. Our sun-drenched apartment, nestled amongst the city's pulse, had ceased to be merely a place of residence, and had become the very heart of our new beginning. Every morning, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with Danielle's cheerful chatter as she prepared for her own burgeoning career, a testament to her independence and brilliance. Our evenings were often filled with shared meals, debates over current events, or simply the comfortable quietude of reading side by side. Financial independence, once a desperate goal, was now a quiet hum of security, allowing us the freedom to pursue passions, support causes we believed in, and travel to destinations that once existed only in my wildest dreams. There was a profound emotional peace that settled into my bones, a lightness I hadn't realized was missing for so many years. It was the peace of knowing my worth, untethered from another's perception, and of building a life where joy was not just possible, but plentiful. This new life, so rich and fulfilling, extended its warmth beyond just Danielle and me. Kingston, Nicholas, Hayes's father, had become a steadfast, if reserved pillar of our extended family. Our regular Sunday dinners at his stately home were now an anticipated tradition, filled not with strained politeness, but with genuine affection. He treated Danielle not just as a granddaughter, but as a young woman whose intellect and resilience he deeply admired. And he looked upon me with a quiet respect that spoke volumes. Zachary, Hayes's brother too, found a comfortable place in our lives. His quiet integrity, a stark contrast to his brother's performative charm, made him a trusted confidant and a true friend. He'd often join us for movie nights or help Danielle with a particularly thorny problem, his presence a comforting reminder of genuine familial love. We were a family forged not by blood ties alone, but by shared values, mutual respect, and the quiet understanding that had blossomed from the wreckage of the past. I often found myself reflecting on the woman I once was, the Glattis who had so readily sacrificed her own light for the perceived glow of her husband's ambition. That woman felt like a character from a distant, almost forgotten novel. The girl who believed in fairy tale princes and enduring, unquestioning love had died the night of my anniversary party. But her demise had paved the way for a woman far more resilient, intelligent, and, ultimately, free. I had learned that self-worth wasn't a commodity to be granted by another, but an inherent truth to be fiercely protected. The power of choice, I realized, was the most potent weapon I possessed, not just in dismantling Hayes's empire, but in constructing my own. Every investment, every chapter of my book, every shared laugh with Danielle, was a deliberate act of building a life on my own terms, free from the shadows of betrayal, free from the past's suffocating grip. My journey had taken me through the crucible of public humiliation and private heartbreak, but I had emerged whole, stronger, and irrevocably transformed. The door to Hayes Kingston, to the pain and the person he represented, was not merely shut, it was bricked up, plastered over, and painted with the vibrant hues of my own hard-won contentment. Danielle, my fierce and loyal daughter, stood beside me, a living testament to our shared triumph. Our future stretched before us, an unwritten narrative of happiness, independence, and profound, lasting serenity.